Welcome back to the Cosmic Curiosity. When we look up at the night sky, it's so easy to just get lost in the beautiful, gorgeous, fascinating stargazing wonder of it all, right? It really is a realistic, breathtaking view. But actually getting up to those stars, well, that's a harsh, unforgiving reality. On the night of May 28, 2026, the sky over Florida's Space Coast didn't just light up with stars, it literally glowed bright orange from a massive fireball that you could see from over 100 miles away. Blue Origin's colossal New Glenn rocket suffered a completely devastating explosion right there on the launch pad. It's a moment that sent shockwaves, both literal and metaphorical, through the entire aerospace industry. So in today's Explainer, we're going to do a deep, impartial analysis of this event. We're diving into all the minute details to figure out the reason behind this launching failure in plain, simple language, and more importantly, we'll see how this blast radius expands to impact everything from global internet to humanity's return to the moon.
Okay, let's dive right into this and look at our roadmap. 1. Explosion on the launch pad. 2. A history of setbacks. 3. The Amazon constellation delay. 4. NASA's lunar base dilemma. And 5. Widening the SpaceX gap.
All right, starting with Section 1, Explosion on the launch pad.
So let's get right to the raw facts of the incident. It was May 28, 2026, and Blue Origin was at Cape Canaveral's Launch Complex 36 doing what's called a static fire test for their New Glenn rocket. Now, if you're not super familiar, a static fire is essentially a dress rehearsal. The rocket is clamped down tight to the pad, and they ignite the engines just to test the performance without actually lifting off. But as those methane-fueled BE-4 engines fired up, an anomaly, which was likely a sudden pressure failure, happened right at the base of the 188-foot-tall first stage. In an instant, the rocket was engulfed in this rapidly growing fire, it collapsed, and boom, exploded into a massive mushroom cloud. It totally destroyed the vehicle and heavily damaged the surrounding pad infrastructure. But here is the absolute best news from this whole thing. Casualties were zero. No personnel were harmed at all, and since it was just a pre-launch test, there wasn't any expensive satellite payload lost in the fire.
Blue Origin's founder, Jeff Bezos, actually took to social media shortly after the dust settled to confirm everyone was safe. He said, "Very rough day, but we'll rebuild whatever needs rebuilding and get back to flying. It's worth it." I think this really humanizes what is otherwise a massive corporate disaster, right? It kind of grounds the sheer scale of the destruction at the launch pad in the reality of the hard work they have ahead. Because rebuilding Launch Complex 36, that is going to be a monumental task.
Let's move on to Section 2, a history of setbacks.
Because we really need to zoom out to understand the context here. This explosion wasn't just some random, isolated incident. New Glenn has honestly faced a brutal development cycle. Back in January 2025, its debut flight made it to orbit, but it completely missed the booster landing. Then, Flight 2 in November 2025, huge success. They actually nailed the landing of that massive booster on a sea platform. But then, just last month in April 2026, Flight 3 had a payload anomaly that left an AST Space mobile satellite stuck in an orbit way too low to even operate. And now, May 2026, we have the pre-launch explosion of what was supposed to be Flight 4. It proves a pattern of aerospace setbacks that honestly is pretty common when you're developing rockets, but man, it is incredibly costly when your timelines are this tight.
To give you an idea of the technical hurdles, let's look at the simple physics of what grounded them back in April. It was a cryogenic leak. Rockets use these extremely supercooled liquid gases as propellants. Well, in April, those freezing fluids escaped and basically flash froze a nearby hydraulic line solid. And when your hydraulics freeze, your engine valves literally cannot move, which leads to a thrust anomaly. The crazy thing is, they had just fixed this. They were finally cleared to fly again, which makes this brand new pad explosion just a totally devastating blow to their momentum.
Which brings us to our first major ripple effect. Section 3, the Amazon constellation delay.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it impacts other companies. Amazon is currently building a mega constellation of broadband internet satellites called LEO, meant to compete directly with other space-based networks. But they are racing against a massive, unyielding regulatory clock. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, requires Amazon to have half of their massive constellation in orbit by late July 2026 just to keep their spectrum license. Half means 1,616 satellites. Currently, they only have 302 up there. Let that sink in.
And that regulatory clock just got a whole lot louder. The New Glenn rocket that exploded was actually gearing up for a targeted June 4th launch. Its mission? To carry 48 of those crucial Amazon LEO satellites up into space. Now, thankfully, the satellites weren't sitting on top of the rocket during the static fire.
But that specific June 4th launch window is now completely wiped out. This directly stalls Amazon's broadband rollout at a time when they literally cannot afford a single delay.
So this leaves Amazon facing a fascinating, kind of brutal corporate dilemma. Do they just wait around for Blue Origin to investigate the explosion and rebuild the LC-36 launch pad, which, let's be real, could take many, many months? Or do they bite the bullet and buy more launches from a competitor? The profound irony here is that to keep their internet constellation alive and meet those strict FCC deadlines, Amazon is being forced to rely even more heavily on their biggest competitor's rockets, SpaceX's Falcon 9.
Let's escalate the stakes even higher. Section 4. NASA's Lunar Base Dilemma.
NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman responded to the pad explosion with a pretty sobering reminder. He stated, "Spaceflight is unforgiving. We will provide information on any impacts to the Artemis and Moon base programs." This statement bridges the commercial disaster directly to American national interests. You see, the U.S. relies heavily on commercial partners to pull off its space ambitions, and Blue Origin is an absolutely critical pillar in NASA's multi-billion-dollar Artemis program.
And NASA's lunar milestones are deeply intertwined with New Glenn. First off, it was recently selected to deliver the Viper rover to the Moon. Then, Blue Origin is supposed to launch their uncrewed Blue Moon Mark 1 cargo lander later this year as a vital prototype test. Both of those steps are crucial stepping stones toward the ultimate goal, putting the Artemis 4 crew on the lunar surface in 2028. Without an intact launch pad, this entire cascading timeline is under severe threat.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, widening the SpaceX gap.
If we look at the raw orbital missions from the previous year, 2025, the visual contrast here is just staggering. SpaceX successfully flew 165 orbital missions. Blue Origin, they flew 3. SpaceX is basically launching a rocket every 2 days. They possess this massive, almost untouchable lead in cadence and reliability. And when commercial clients or government agencies are looking for a ride to orbit, demonstrated reliability is exactly what they are paying for.
Now, showing some real industry solidarity, SpaceX founder Elon Musk reacted to the explosion by saying, "Most unfortunate, rockets are hard. Sorry to see this, I hope you recover quickly." It's an objective reminder that space is difficult for absolutely everyone. In fact, SpaceX experienced a very similar catastrophic pad explosion back in September 2016, when a Falcon 9 blew up during a static fire test just like this. SpaceX was grounded for months while they investigated and rebuilt. But there is one major, crucial difference between SpaceX back in 2016 and Blue Origin today. And that difference is the number 1. Just 1. That is the exact number of orbital launch pads Blue Origin currently operates for the New Glenn rocket. When SpaceX lost their pad in 2016, they had other pads in Florida and California that they could fall back on once the rocket was cleared to fly again. Blue Origin only has Launch Complex 36. Until that single pad is totally repaired and rebuilt, the New Glenn rocket literally has nowhere to fly from. It represents a massive, unavoidable bottleneck for the company. So what does this all mean? It leaves us with the ultimate question for the future of space exploration. With NASA's 2028 lunar goals looming large, can Blue Origin rebuild its launch pad and its momentum in time? The blast radius of this single explosion has touched satellite internet, lunar bases, and the entire billionaire space race. Spaceflight is incredibly unforgiving, for sure, but it's also endlessly fascinating to watch humans push the boundaries of what is possible in the cosmos. Will they overcome this bottleneck to reach the stars? It's a reality we are going to continue to watch unfold together right here. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the cosmic curiosity. If you love exploring these fascinating stargazing mysteries with us, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Cosmic Curiosity YouTube channel. Keep visiting, share this with your friends and family members, keep looking up, and keep asking questions.